Well, welcome. We really appreciate you joining us this afternoon. And I'd like to do two things during my brief introduction, and that is to introduce you to our team, because we have grown over the last couple of years, and also then give you a brief journey through our Flex experiences over the last couple of years. So we couldn't talk about Flex without talking about the team, and as many would attest, it's all about the people. And so I just want to acknowledge that it's the team that brings all this information. And for those of you that aren't within our BI team, you probably look sometimes and say, well, what are all those different veterinarians doing? Because this is our veterinary technical staff. And so I'd like to just take the first few minutes and describe 5 different functional teams of our swine veterinarians and hopefully give you a flavor for what we do. The first one is our technical managers that work within our marketing group. And the technical managers are responsible for organizing information based upon specific diseases and critical products that we have. So, for example, Dr. Edgar Diaz is in charge of the team, and he is our expert for mycoplasma and circovirus. Dr. Reed Phillips for PRRS, Dr. Jeff Husa for Salmonella and Lawsonia, and Dr. Don Walter, as was mentioned earlier, is our technical communications manager, because with all the data and information that we generate, it's really helpful to have somebody that's pushing all those papers through. So that's our technical managers. They're there to serve you as customers as well, but they primarily support our internal team and help us to be better prepared to serve you. Then we have the PRRS Area Solutions team, and that's a new team that Dr. Dale Polson put together just in the last year. And as it says, it's a team that's focused on area regional control specific to PRRS. They do work with the rest of our team and help us with tools that we need as we work on different challenging PRRS cases. But they'll also be leading us and hopefully the industry into some very unique area regional control programs. So in addition to Dale, we've got Dr. John Paul Cano, Dr. Enrique Mendaca, and Dr. Laura Batista that have joined our BI team, again within the Area Solutions team. The last 3 teams that we have include our professional service teams, which you should recognize as the folks that are out there in the trenches with you and work with you locally on your different herds and businesses. And this team is in the process, I can count, there's not 4 here, there's 3, but this team is in the process of hiring a 4th veterinarian, and it's led by Dr. Tom Wetzel and includes Dr. Jeff Okonis and Dr. Keith Breddy. And when I say upper Midwest, these guys service Minnesota, Iowa, the Dakotas primarily. Then I took some liberty here. I don't know where Angela is. I called it the southern region, and if you can include Nebraska and Missouri and Illinois into the south, well, then we've got a southern region. But we've got Dr. Angela Basinger leading this team with Dr. Aaron Johnson, Dr. Tom Fangman, and Dr. Brian Payne. And then our final professional service team works with the national accounts, which are some of the large accounts out on the East Coast as well as out in the West. And led by Dr. Greg Klein, we've got Jose Angulo and Arturo Oropeza, along with John Kolb. And John also works with that team on some of its global accounts. So those are the 3 professional service teams that are out there working with you, and hopefully you recognize at least one of those pictures as somebody from BI that's working with you. All right, now I'd like to just shift gears and briefly walk through some of the journey that we've taken with Flex. And it all starts in Missouri. I think most are aware that our manufacturing plant is up in St. Joe in the northwest corner. And our first Flex vaccine was approved in 2006, and the first few doses Greg Klein grabbed right out of St. Joe and ran and did a field trial also in north central Missouri. And so I'd like to start by just describing a little bit of the trial that Greg did to get us started on this journey. And that trial was an individual pig trial, and there were 3 different treatment groups. There was a control group, non-vaccinated. There was a group that received Circoflex at 3 weeks of age, and a group that received Circoflex at 6 weeks of age. And you can see all told there's over 1,000 pigs on the study. This study, as well as studies that we did after that, for these individual pig studies, there's a lot of work that goes into it to assure that we've got good data. These were individually tagged and weighed pigs. We then took that and blocked those pigs by weight and randomly allocated within block to assure that we had good allocation back to the different treatment groups. You can see one pig with a red ear tag we're choosing pigs within each pen to then serially bleed to follow along for the viremia and ELISA results. So what did Greg find in that very first study? Well, as you can imagine, in a clinical PCBID herd, there was significant improvement in weight gain, in this case over 13 pounds in both the 3-week and the 6-week vaccinates, and a significant reduction in colon mortality rate from over 14% to less than 4% in both of those groups. Conclusion, which Greg has already gotten this paper peer-reviewed published, was that Circoflex was effective, and that was a great start for us with this journey. At both 21 and 42 days of age, or at 3 and 6 weeks of age. It's important to note that peak viremia in that study was already at 10 weeks of age. So that 6-week vaccinated group performed as well as the 3-week, even though it was only 4 weeks in front of the peak viremia, suggesting and supporting the rapid onset of immunity. All right, with the exception of one person, this is not a BI team, but this is my home Holck team, with the exception of the photographer, which Gail gets relegated to the photographer usually. I put this up here because it's figuratively we're working with just a mound of data at BI now. And this is literally right out in front of our house. I don't know if most of you have experienced the winter that we have in Iowa, but it's been pretty amazing. We'd like to work through that snow, and at BI we'd like to work through the data such that we're back to spring and we're back to some things that we can see and we can touch and we can feel here. So that's my Holck team. Again, the photographer's behind the camera. But as we work through these mounds of snow or these mounds of data, what I've got here is the first trial is the one I just showed you, but there's 9 more that have the same, basically the same protocol. They've got the same setup, and time after time after time we're showing, well, there's strong efficacy with Circoflex. How else can we look at that, or what else should we be doing with that data? I'd like to acknowledge Dale Polson and his help here, because we took that data and we're starting to look at that in a meta-analysis, or in this case it's called a forest plot. And I guess I look at it simplistically as being able to see the forest through the trees. And in this graph, what you have are 10 different trials. So those 10 trials that I just showed in this table now are represented visually on this graph, and each row represents a trial. The size of the box represents the magnitude or the number of animals on the trial, and then you can see the amount of variation. Where those boxes are located on this graph is dictated by whether they favor the A treatment group, in this case the non-vaccinates on the left, or the B treatment group, in this case Circoflex, on the right. And as you can see, all of these just line up over on the right, suggesting, again, continued and consistent efficacy that we see with Circoflex. The one point that helps with this meta-analysis is the bottom one, and that's a green diamond that you see there. That diamond represents the aggregate of all 10 of those trials. So I think we're going to start taking these mounds of snow, these mounds of data, and start looking at it in a meta-analysis way. All right, back to immunology. How many Iowa State grads do we have here? Just curious. And how many had Jim Roth? Okay. So you recognize this, and you're sitting there going, but Circoflex is just one dose. How can that be? How can it work? Well, this is a quote from Jim saying that vaccines that are approved as being efficacious with one dose contain sufficient antigen and adjuvant to drive that immune system through the primary right into the secondary. So coming right from the immunologist, even on top of the graph that you probably got back in school, it's saying, well, given the right antigen and given the right adjuvant, those can work. What do we have in Circoflex? We've got purified circoantigen, which comes from a baculovirus, the ORF2, and that's purified, and then that's put in with an adjuvant, Impran Flex, that with the cross matrix, the sponge-like effect, allows us to have an immediate release and then a slow release depot. So that antigen and adjuvant combination then allows us to have an effective one dose. So when we now take the meta-analysis and we say, well, what have we looked at comparing one dose Circoflex to 2 full dose or label dose Circumvent, a 2-dose product? Can the 1 dose be as good as a 2 dose? Line them up here again, Circumvent on the left, Circoflex on the right, And there's those 4 studies, the 3 on the right, 1 on the left, and you can see where the green diamond ends up on the right, in this case on this meta-analysis. So we continue to work through our data and look at what is that data telling us. This is my son. He's on third base in a critical game, and I enjoy coaching, but I enjoy coaching mainly because it helps us to think through what are we going to do next. And what I'd like to do is then show you some work that we've done at the pen level. All that work that I just described was at the individual pig level, but that doesn't allow us to gather feed data or feed efficiency data. So what does this study look like? This has got 6 different treatment groups. You've got a non-vaccinated control. You've got Circoflex full dose at 3 weeks of age, Circoflex split dose 3 and 6 weeks of age, Circumvent as per label full dose at 3 and 6 weeks of age. You've got Suvaxin at 3 weeks of age and Suvaxin split dose 3 and 6 weeks of age. And again, this is at the pen level. These are not individual pig weights. So when we look at the pen level, we certainly have to take into account where are those pens located and do we have any bias. And so in this case, we've blocked such that the different areas within the barn and certainly by gender are taken into account. And in this case, there was also 2 different barns on this 5-barn site that were utilized. What did we see for PCB2 exposure? We saw peak exposure a little bit later here at 18 weeks of age in the non-vaccinated controls and started seeing viremia already at 14 weeks in the non-vaccinated. Really no other viremia to speak of other than the Suvaxin group at 6 weeks of age immediately after their second dose. Other than that, there was viremia in the peak viremia at 18 weeks of age in the non-vaccinates. So that's where I go to the cumulative average daily gain graph. So this is average daily gain. Again, think about the 6 treatment groups. The red line at the bottom is your non-vaccinated controls. And we start here not at the very beginning at day 0 on the trial, but at day 86. And so going left to right, we're starting where we start to see viremia, and as you would expect, we're spreading out those treatment groups. The non-vaccinated controls at the bottom with each of the different vaccinated treatment groups above that. Of interest is at the very end, the last 4 weeks, you'll see the Circoflex 1 dose continue to distance itself from the other treatment groups. And the other thing we're able to do in this study, as I mentioned, is look at feed, in this case feed efficiency. And again, there was only 1 treatment group, Circoflex at 3 weeks of age, the 1 dose, that was significantly improved from the non-vaccinate. The other groups were numerically improved but not significant. When we look at field trials, it's really important that we take into account different biases. And so just showing within this same study that barrels and gilts were compared, and there was a significant difference between barrels and gilts, as you would expect with feed efficiency. There was also significance between barns when you look at the barn effect. So it's really important to either have those in the model or to have that in your allocation scheme so as to not introduce those biases into your different treatment groups. So what the conclusions were at this pen level trial, Circoflex 1 dose significantly improved feed efficiency. And important for all of us, field trial design and allocation is really critical when we get down to assessing different field trials. The benefit cost for this one, when you plug in average daily gain, colon mortality, and feed efficiency, was over $4.50 to 1 for the Circoflex 1 dose. So where are we at on the journey? Circoflex was launched in 2006. At the very end of 2006, it was the 3rd one to market. And this just shows you the estimate of number of pigs vaccinated in the U.S. over 2007, 2008, and 2009. And I think you can see where all of this information is coming to bear. What do we have here for a product? And Circoflex has continued to grow, and today is the product of choice for the U.S. market.